And now to introduce the panel and speakers, I'd like to welcome Mr. Suresh Patadhil, General Manager and Managing Director, Allergan India Private Limited and AbbVie India. A very warm welcome and over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Kayati. And as the evening progresses, the sessions are becoming more interesting. And I think, we have always been talking about R&D and the kind of footprint which the global pharma has in India. And I think the trending themes are make in India and discover in India. So we would like to know from the, very esteemed panel which we have today, who represents the who's who of global pharma, on the economic and health footprint of global pharmaceutical industry in India. So let me go ahead without any ado, introduce the panel to all of you. Simpson Emmanuel is the Managing Director and CEO, Roche Products India Private Limited. Simpson oversees India affiliates operations and provides guidance towards achieving company's North Star for delivering better outcomes for more patients and faster drugs to the market. He has almost 20 years of experience in the Indian pharmaceutical sector, especially in areas of marketing, strategic planning, sales management, new product planning, and patient access programs. He holds a master's degree in health economics, economic evaluation, and health technology from the University of York, UK, and postgraduate diploma in business administration and marketing, and a bachelor's degree in physics. Next, a panelist is Mr. Manuel Saxena. Manoj Saxena is currently the Managing Director of Bayer Zydus Pharma and Country Division Head, South Asia Pharmaceuticals. As part of Bayer's Asia Pacific Pharma leadership team, he is known for his contribution in driving key growth strategies within the region with a deep understanding of the healthcare industry. In his various roles, senior management roles, Manoj has had opportunities to work closely on the India domestic strategy, new launches, new strategic business enterprises, and various other organizational projects from time to time. So welcome, Manoj. Our next panelist is Mr. Vikrant Shrotriya. Vikrant is the Managing Director and Corporate Vice President for Novo Nordisk's India business based in Bangalore. Vikrant has a distinguished career spanning over 20 years in the healthcare industry in India and internationally. He studied in Delhi University and Symbiosis, Pune, and has worked in many national and international organizations in India, Southeast Asia, and more recently in the GCC countries, where he was the Vice President for Novo Nordisk GCC business and Corporate Vice President for Saudi Arabia. Vikrant has been honored with several accolades throughout his career. Most recently, he received one of the highest awards from the Danish government, His Royal Highness Prince Henrik's Medal of Excellence, in recognition for his outstanding contribution to business and trade. Welcome, Vikrant. Our next panelist is Gagan Singh. Mr. Gagan Singh brings a wealth of experience in healthcare, having worked in India and also in global roles. He is currently the Country President and Managing Director for AstraZeneca India since July 2017. And prior to that, Gagan was heading the he was the global head of established brands based in UK. In 2012, he was appointed as the Country President for AstraZeneca Philippines. Prior to Astra, he has worked for Baxter and Eli Lilly and Company. He also represents the industry as chair of the Pharma Committee for FICCI. So welcome, Gagan, to the panel. Our next panelist is Sai Sethuraban. Sai is Head of Research and Development at Pfizer Chennai. He heads the Parenteral sterile injectables drug product R&D site and portfolio management team in Chennai, India. In the past several years, he has built, managed global program management teams for Pfizer in both R&D and operations. He has a broad-based work experience spanning more than 30 years in US and India. He has functioned in diverse roles, including project management, manufacturing, engineering, and business development across industries, finished dosages, APIs, biologics, specialty chemicals. And he is a graduate of chemical engineering from IIT Mumbai, has an MS from Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago, and an MBA from University of South Carolina, Columbia. So we have a welcome, Sai, to the panel. So we have a very esteemed panel. Now, the person who's going to make this panel discussion more interesting is Amit Mookim. Amit has been a management consultant turned into a business leader and currently oversees the India operations of IQVIA, a global healthcare technology, information, and clinical research organization. His experience in digital health has extended to supporting innovation and entrepreneurship in India. He is an advisor to the NHA on innovation, president at TAI Mumbai, and mentor to health startups. Prior to IQVIA, Amit was head of healthcare at KPMG. He was one of the youngest partners in KPMG and helped the firm build and grow the private equity and strategy business, and also the healthcare practice for India across Asia Pacific. He's worked across 11 countries across India, Asia Pacific as part of his role. Amit has done a bachelor's in economics from University of Calcutta and MBA from Faculty of Management Studies, Delhi. Amit believes that spirituality, fitness are the key aspects for personality development and also good health, Amit. Amit is an amateur marathon runner and coaches entrepreneurs on managing stress while being centered in spirituality. So Amit is going to make this discussion very interesting with a very esteemed panel. And over to you, Amit.
Thank you, Suresh. And thank you for this long introduction. It's almost embarrassing to consume so much time, but welcome to all of you. Very good evening. Thank you to OPPI for having us on this panel. Thank you for the panelists for taking out time for this discussion, which I feel is an incredibly important and a timely discussion. What I thought could be great to set the context before I dive into a conversation is just to show a few data points to the audience and to yourselves. And I would request Manish, if you can, please pull up a short presentation that I've put together for the benefit of furthering this discussion. Yeah, Manish, I'm just going to request you to move slide by slide. So just wait for my cue. Yeah. If you can move to the next slide. Yeah. The next one. Okay, so I thought it is important, and especially in a context and an event and a symposium like this, to really take everyone back to where we are and what really this industry, these companies, and my fellow panelists have contributed to bringing the life science industry to where we are today. If you look at almost 50 years ago, and that's not very far if you look at history, right? The industry in India, the pharmaceutical industry in India was just between 10 to 15 crores. It was set up by a few multinational organizations, many of them who are on this panel, who came in and set up shop. There were a few Indian entrepreneurs who also took steps to set up this industry, but that's where this industry was. Fast forward 20 years, the industry grew to about 450 crores. That's when regulation came in. The Patent Act was filed, the Drug Price Control Order came in, and then we had the generation of pharma entrepreneurs, which was before the generation of IT and technology entrepreneurs. And I'm relating and listing that because when entrepreneurship comes in India, many people talk about technology, but very few people understand that true entrepreneurship actually came in from healthcare and pharma. Fast forward another 20 years, 2010, and just 10 years ago, liberalization happened and the industry grew to 7,500 crores. That's when people started thinking about innovation. That's when people understood what were therapies. That's when diabetes began to be known as a disease, right? That's when India started to think about becoming the pharmacy of the world. And really the engagement with global regulators, good manufacturing practices, and the industry started building up in India. And today, we are sitting at a 2 lakh crore market, which is almost 20, 30 times the industry that was there 10 years ago, right? Today, we have the market that is well established. There are very, very clear growth drivers. But more importantly, the point I wanted to make here is if you go back 30, 40 years, the innovation that happened is contributed by many of my fellow panelists, organizations that actually brought this to India. Can we move to the next slide? So where are we today? We are currently one of the fastest growing markets in the world. we have consistently had double-digit growth. Even during the pandemic, we've managed to grow. If we look at the breakup of the market, it is still a very, very retail-driven market, which also signifies that there is much, much more headroom to actually see what can be done to support the institutional growth. And that's just started. All of y'all are aware of the largest universal healthcare program that has taken off in this country. Right? If you look at the therapies that are driving the growth and really, really contributing and supporting the Indian pharma industry, it's three, right? It's anti-diabetic, cardiac, and respiratory. And there's no difference whether it's a pandemic or non-pandemic. Today, we have 600 companies, including 45 MNCs. We have close to 50,000 brands, which is one of the largest number of brands that you'll find in any country. We have close to 80,000 SKUs, which is again one of the largest number of SKUs you'll find in any country in the world, and close to 5,000 products that are launched every year. Now, I'm not going into this side of innovation or non-innovation, but what I wanted to lay out here is that India by no means is an easy market. India by no means is a small market. And currently, all of us are still staring at the cusp of growth. And many of these launches, all of us are aware, still require a lot more innovation to happen than what is really behind this. Can we move to the next slide, Manish? I think there are 3 or 4 things I wanted to point out. And this is something as an exercise OPPI actually carried out over the last few months. And it is a great reflection to see what really has happened with respect to the economic impact and the innovation that companies, especially the multinational pharmaceutical companies, have done in India. Today, we have 27 multinational pharmaceutical companies from under 10 that was there 60 years ago. The revenue turnover contribution is close to 35,000 crores, growing at 6 to 7%. There are 200 product launches that are in pipeline. Most of them are innovative products. Currently, there are 1,300 products, including patented, licensed, and co-marketed products that are being contributed by MNC pharma companies. 400 clinical trials, which is almost 70% of these trials in India have been sponsored by global pharma companies. And there are 665 US FDA approved manufacturing plants in India outside the US, which is the highest in the world. So many times, sometimes we often think about India as being purely a generics market. We often think about India as being the pharmacy of the world. But I think it's important to step back and understand that there has been a significant contribution to drive innovation, new products, patented products in the market by the industry itself, which has contributed to the growth of this industry. Manish, can we move to the next slide? When we look at what really are the 3 pillars, and these pillars are incredibly important to grow the industry itself. We all know that one of the biggest issues India faces is affordability. And there have been multiple programs, whether it's a program that Roche has launched or Bayer or Novo or whoever else, to improve patient access, patient assistance, and more importantly, patient awareness. I think the other piece has been how pricing has really happened in the Indian pharma market. And despite popular opinion, I think there has been very conscious, and I'm using the word conscious because we have seen conscious pricing happen to actually improve the access of products in the Indian pharma market. And I think the third is, how do you channel innovation? I think there have been many ways, right? You bring innovation yourself, you actually build your own teams, but then how do you scale up innovation disproportionately? And you can only do that through partnerships and inorganic means. And there are numerous examples of how partnerships with either local Indian pharma companies, global pharma companies, other digital health players have been sourced and driven and established to actually build brands as well as therapy growth and support in the Indian pharma market. Manish, can we move to the next slide? I think one of the things I wanted to actually call out is the role partnerships as well as co-marketing has played. And these are just examples. There are many, many more examples. But why I have called out these examples is that the need for innovation in these therapy areas is huge. And the need for access and distribution and really bringing the right medicine and the right care to the patient is incredibly important. And we have seen multiple examples over the last few decades of companies which have partnered with Indian pharma companies across these therapy areas to actually scale up and accelerate the access of drugs as well as markets to patients and HCPs across the industry. Manish, can you move to the next slide? Often there is a question asked, and we were debating this in the panel prep itself, is what really is the share of global launches vis-a-vis Indian launches, and we'll talk about it in the panel. But it's a growing story. I think there's the highway and the roadmap still needs to be built, but the reality of the situation today is that a third of global trials and global products are being launched in India today. And that number was less than a quarter about 5 to 6 years ago. So there's really an uptick. Can this increase more? And that's a question for the panel that I'm going to pose there. But the reality of the situation is that 1/3 of global launches are happening in India. The time frame to launch has decreased to less than a year. The last time we tracked the trends, it was 6 to 8 months. The same number was 24 to 36 months about 5 to 6 years ago. So we are getting quicker innovation and faster innovation and a larger share of innovation that is happening in India today. Can we move to the next slide? And companies are spending extensively on both R&D and clinical trials. Today, we have close to 2,500 patients across 200 sites for phase 3 trials in India. And 90% of the global phase 3 trials are being conducted in India. And I think while these numbers may not sound huge given the Indian diaspora and the size, I think it's a start. A significant amount of money is being spent. I think a lot needs to be done to create the infrastructure to bring innovation into India. But where this was a few years ago, there's almost a 4 to 5 time increase if you see the investments that have happened in clinical trials and other things over the last few years. Manish, can we move to the next slide? So now, with this background, I would like to welcome again my panel members. And just to keep it simple in the order of alphabetical order and no seniority, experience, and everything else, I would really request each of you to spend a couple of minutes, as a reaction to this information that I shared, and also to share a few points around how each of your organizations think about innovation and R&D and the economic impact you'll have created in India before I move into pointed questions. Thank you. So I think Gagan, it's you first.
Okay, thanks, Amit. Thanks for the very engaging conversation that you set up with your set of data. I think, I mean, if you look at, our pharma industry, we are very, really proud of what we've achieved in this industry. I think ranked third worldwide in volume, shows the mass of people that we've been able to treat and access with affordable medication, and also not Mickey Mouse in terms of value anymore, with 14th ranked globally. I think clearly at 42 billion, if you put our exports and domestic together, we are really leading from that front. In terms of India making significant strides, I think all of us have been proud. And through the evening, people have covered of the fact that how we responded to COVID, using our talent as well as our innovation, beginning with developing indigenous vaccines, as well as more importantly also partnering where AstraZeneca could contribute in terms of tech transfers and others. But the kind of scale at which we produced was something remarkable, and I think that's something which clearly underlines the talent which this industry possesses and its ability to rise in difficult times and challenging times, be it just not just vaccines, be it remdesivir or other set of drugs and other companies, everyone really raised to the occasion. So my own belief is, I think the ground is very, very fertile. for both R&D and innovation. We may not go the traditional route where West went with product development through a brick and mortar model, but I think we've got the opportunity to really concise the whole R&D cycle with collaboration with technology and other led innovations that we have. So I believe the decade from here is what I call as innovation-led decade that we'll see in India. And building on that theme, I think at AZ we've clearly always recognized the opportunity which India possesses. And talking about our R&D footprint, so we committed about 500 crores in the India-Sweden innovation partnership, which happened in 2018. And following that, we've invested very, very significantly. You showed 400 global clinical trials in India. We contribute 40 of them. Currently, we have 39 ongoing trials. We work with 239 sites. And based on that, we've been able to launch and build our portfolio introductions very, very significantly. While the industry average is about 11 to 12% contribution of patented drugs to the turnover, we're averaging over 50%. So for the past 3 years. So you can clearly see it's not just all about global clinical trials, but it's also about leading to faster approvals as well as including innovation there. The second part of our commitment in the whole innovation space was really expanding the R&D organization. We began with 25. Today, we've got about 200 people who are really looking at patient safety and data very, very closely out of Bangalore. And, once a drug is launched, it's continuously monitored to manage safety and efficacy. And this data is very, very critical in the development of the drug and further information which comes through. Last part of our contribution towards R&D and innovation is the level of engagement we've built with the startups in India. So we've run 2 startup programs till now. We're now with the second generation startup. We run our COE in partnership with NASCOM as well as AIMS in Jodhpur, where we brought academia, we brought tech startups together, and we mentor them. And the classic example here is we're looking at patient pathways, and we're looking at how can we really remove the obstacles both from preclinical right down to post-clinical of a drug journey. How do we help with better, access, awareness, and other aspects in a patient journey? Under this program, I'm proud to share that a couple of them from our first generation startups are international brands now. They're funded by PE funds and they're available in over 12 countries connected across AstraZeneca globally. So there's a lot that India has also contributed in the innovation and R&D for us, which is absolutely, what is startup in India or made up in India, and that's contributing. So that in a nutshell is our footprint, Amit. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Gagan, and thank you for broadening this whole conversation into different aspects beyond this trial. Really appreciate it. Manoj, over to you.
Yeah, quick thoughts. I think what Gagan said and what you said is the focus on research and development. I think India a little bit missed the bus in the early part of this decade where the clinical trial did pose a challenge. But I think as your charts were showing that the clinical trials, most of the pharma companies, including ours, we are conducting almost all the global clinical trials. India is being now part of it. The also commitment to launch patented drugs, I guess 30% is what you were, 1/3 products are being launched in India. Probably for us, it's much higher. The vehicle of launches in terms of looking at India as a strategic market is critical for us. But more importantly, I think on the R&D piece, India is playing a critical role from 2 aspects. One is the whole global clinical trials where India, from its diverse population and also now the ecosystem getting better, does portray a fertile land, but also from a talent perspective. Yeah, and if you look at classically India from a STEM perspective was always there, but now with the clinical trials ecospace getting in, there are large centers being built up, and we didn't have the brick and mortar structure a few years back. 3 years back, we set up a data science analytics centers in Hyderabad, and we have really expanded it extremely high. from an FTE, but also focusing on roles which in the past were not coming to India and now coming to India. So it's not just the data manager and data leads, but also typically biostatistician roles at senior level in the R&D structure, which are not only just doing the R&D work for India, but also globally. And apart from that, I think one of the aspects around which Gagan also said is the whole startup ecosystem, right? We awarded one through the OPPI today, but I think we have a global program on funding startups, and a lot of Indian startups have been funded, and I think they have gained momentum, size from thought leadership, have got benefit, and I think India would remain a very, very fertile land for that. You have been a mentor yourself, Amit, and you have seen that how health tech and probably the right ecosystem would help them to grow. So I'm extremely positive. I think there are also some aspects where we can play a greater role. When I say we is stakeholders beyond just the pharma industry, and hopefully incentivize the innovation. Then what we see from a manufacturing hub moving into an innovation hub, India could typically mean. And I think while accolades for manufacturing capabilities of having the highest number of US FDA plants in India, I think the time in the next decade or so should be also that how many new drugs are being, from a basic research, and the investments and the incentivizing on the basic research is being, so I think that's also is something which I'm hoping that would significantly improve in the next decade.
Thank you so much, Manoj. I'll come back to you. Sai and then Simpson and Vikrant.
And thank you, Amit, and honored to be part of this panel. I appreciate. I think I will echo some things that Gaganji and Manoj said earlier. Right, we look at innovation across the value chain. So, from what Pfizer is engaged in right now is from chemical development for API to finished dosage forms to all the way to managing clinical trials and getting the product on the market. So, what is it that we ask our folks to do? We ask our folks to look at new ways of doing things that can deliver breakthroughs. So innovation, that what we are expecting and what we see comes from many areas. So if I look at from a product ideation or new product development, we are looking at products for local as well as global markets. So we're able to participate from the India team, both in patient-centric innovation, looking for new opportunities in our business segment, and see what new products could be developed in our pipeline. And that's from the R&D side. As what Manoj mentioned, we're also engaged in data analytics, data management, and using digital as a platform. And I think we have tremendous amount of talent available to engage and participate in global product development from a data and digital platform standpoint. So throughout what we have grown over last 10 years or so, from a team size of about 40 to right now we have about 800 in Chennai. We are contributing across different business units, from small molecules to biologics to vaccines throughout the segment. So, and I think for us, we're pretty excited about the coming years, whether it's a decade or more, and the amount of growth that we believe we can achieve in India. So that's within Pfizer. What else are we looking at? So some of this information is available now. Pfizer, we're partnering with academia, for example, see how can we spur innovation now, whether it directly contributes to Pfizer or not. Most definitely, I think it's going to contribute to the ecosystem. It's going to contribute to the nation in how we are able to partner and sponsor this type of innovation. We are also partnering with some government-based organizations to spur similar innovation. So throughout, I think that, as was said before, well, manufacturing has made a big impression in terms of how we supply products. But I think it's now that I think the future in front of us is more on the R&D and product development side, and really excited as to what's to come.
Thank you, Sai.
Yeah, I'll quickly jump in. Amit, thank you for this setting the context really well. And I think quite a few important points have already been made. So let me start by saying that India definitely is a massive priority market for Roche. So why do I say that? In 2020, Roche globally rolled out a 10-year vision. It was a very bold vision to say that we are going to provide 3 to 5 times more patient benefit at 50% cost to society by 2030. Very bold, very ambitious. And if Roche globally has to achieve its vision, markets like India become a big focus area. And given the huge unmet need of healthcare that we have here, I don't think so, are going to be achieving our global vision without doing something significant in India. So what has happened over here? Let's talk about the products. We have a very impressive pipeline of more than 20 plus new product launches and indication extensions, which are planned for the next 3 to 5 years. They're predominantly going to be in the areas of oncology, hematology, ophthalmology, neurosciences, and infectious diseases. But what we are also doing today is we are accelerating launches in India to ensure that patients in India get the breakthrough medications as soon as possible. As soon as it's launched in markets like US or EU, we have our products being launched over here. As a matter of fact, somebody was talking about accelerated launches. We had a product called Hemlibra, which was launched within 14 months. Then next launch, which was Evrysdi, which was launched in 10 months of the US FDA launch. And then we had Ronapreve, which was an antibody cocktail, which was launched exactly during the deadly second wave of COVID. We ensured that the antibody cocktail was launched within 27 days from the moment we decided to bring the product into India. It's so far helped more than 80,000 patients fight against COVID. Now, additionally, what is also important that we prepare for new launches. Talking about the global clinical trials, Roche, again, India has been a very large contributor to global clinical trials. In fact, we have been the largest recruiter for the hemophilia segment and also the second largest recruiter in another global clinical trial in the head and neck cancer segment. Today, in fact, our global clinical trial program participation as per India's 5-year pipeline is at nearly 75%, showing a commitment and intent to bring the best-in-class therapies to patients in India. Apart from these initiatives, I think my fellow panelists have also spoken about the various ecosystem shaping activities, which Roche is also involved in. We are in touch with multiple stakeholders in the government. We have launched multiple access projects which are underway. We have a data strategy. Apart from the pharma investment, we also have a major IT investment in India. We have 2 IT hubs, global IT hubs, set up in Pune as well as in Chennai. So there's a lot going on. To sum it up, I'd say that India is important. And we recognize that India is a land of innovation. In fact, it's a land of unstructured pathways, as I call it. It's not the tried and tested model that are going to work in India. So we need to do new things, and we are game for that.
Yeah, and the last, Amit, if you are waiting for, I think
Absolutely.
I think the data points and the gradient which you have actually shown, they are phenomenal, just phenomenal. And imagine that India is more than 20 billion in terms of the domestic market with just 1.35% of the GDP. And with the access to institution, the market is only going to grow. You also threw some of the lights, and I rekindle myself my memory that 30 years back, when it comes to economic footprint, Novo Nordisk was not existent in India. And we were not even there. And now we are one of the major players when it comes to the playground for MNC, and with more than 4,000 employees. So that's the economic footprint. We partnered with Torrent when the biotechnology or biopharmaceuticals were unheard in 1994. That is the economic footprint, and that partnership still continues. Now there are many insulin formulations and various biopharmaceuticals which are there. We started actually the clinical trials when it was just the beginning. And today you showed actually 400 clinical trials. And let me tell you, 7% of those clinical trials are actually from Novo Nordisk. We have got the second largest team in terms of what you talked about innovation. The second largest team after the team which is promoting the medicine is no other than actually the research and development team. And that is also one of the largest investments which we do in India. with more than 280 centers, and I don't know how many subjects which are there. And then you talk about the shared services, the entire data analytics, the report writing, medical report writing, statistical formulation, even the clinical trial designs, and what we are really calling is the digital interface to the clinical trial. All that is happening with the shared service centers sitting in Bangalore. So the whole lot of economic footprint in India is commercial when it comes to manufacturing, access of products. You talked about the access of products. It's not 30% or 70% of the products, global pharma products. In fact, there is no product which we don't launch in India within the global launches within the 1 or 2 years time. So that's the kind of the speed to the launch. So when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to the access of products, when it comes to the research and development, when it comes to the knowledge-based, capacity building in the country, I think the whole gamut which we have been doing in India has been phenomenal. You have talked about the whole pharma industry, but I just took the opportunity after the 5 speaker alluding more on the pharma as well as on their company, just to talk about what a single company as an organization can have an impact. And when you multiply with many of my colleagues and overall MNC, which have been impacting the Indian soil, I think it is phenomenal. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Vikrant, and thank you all of you for really rounding up and doing justice to the first few slides, because that really was the essence. Let me move to a few questions in the next 15, 20 minutes, and then maybe we'll have some time to take questions from the audience. So, Gagan, the first question is for you, and I think you alluded to it in your talk. Let me push this a little more. But if you were to break down R&D and innovation, Gagan, and if I were to ask you to place India on that continuum, right from breakthrough R&D to developmental to applied, and so on and so forth, where would it be, and where would you like it to be?
I think, first of all, I would say India continues to play, and we may not recognize some of us who sit on the formulation side of things, what a critical role India plays in terms of innovation when it comes to custom synthesis. And I'm sure I can elaborate even more than I can on this. But clearly, I can say as an example for AstraZeneca, when you develop a drug, custom synthesis really helps in giving you that flexibility and being part of the critical supply chain when you're developing these R&D products. And India has continued to play that role very, very significantly in custom synthesis. So innovation has been there as part of our DNA when it comes to this aspect. I think what today India can offer is pretty unique. And that uniqueness stems from the intersection of technology and R&D. And that can lead to an R&D getting redefined in terms of its timing, scale, go-to-market, and it can be having a very, very significant impact. I mean, while the data doesn't exist in bioscience, but I definitely know from the IT side of things that, companies who started as IT services today are evolving as part of the engineering R&D. And globally, about 6% of the engineering R&D, India is playing a critical part. I think for bioscience, something similar can happen and very rapidly, be it in artificial intelligence, be it in cloud computing, wearable sensors. All this is going to throw up data which India can help to reshape the entire R&D pipelines or technology as well. So to me, India is been doing what I'll summarize as India has been part of the innovation journey, and I think we can accelerate that given our head start in technology than most other emerging markets.
Thank you, Gagan. Before I move to the next question, is there any additional comment from any of the panelists on this particular question? Okay. So Sai, the next question is for you. And apologies for putting you on the spot, but what would it take for Pfizer to bring more global innovation into India?
Well, okay. I think let me also add to that what Gaganji had said, right? So yes, custom synthesis, the chemical research and development, and formulation. We have a lot of strength, as we all know and acknowledge, that from the 70s and then subsequently from the 80s and 90s for both custom synthesis, chemical synthesis, and formulation development. I think we traditionally, at least if I look at it from within Pfizer, like known for the generic capabilities, but it easily lends itself to contributing to the innovative pipeline as well. So let's take, for example, any product that Pfizer has now, the next gen product development, or the same, whether it is, you can call it life cycle management or evergreening, including bringing the green chemistry. We play a great role here. Formulation development. So this again, once again, coming in with a generic focus, but we can now contribute to the products that are currently being developed in what we typically consider a new product pipeline. And now, what more can we do? I think success builds on itself. Right now, what we are looking at is how can we build on what we already have. I think there was a comment made about digital capabilities. Now, whether we look at it from an IT standpoint or we look at it purely from the point of view of the academic research that is currently happening, or the computer science field where India is contributing greatly to things like machine learning or AI, I think easily sets us up for a great deal of contribution and new innovation to the pharma sectors as well. And we're keenly exploring that right now. One of the examples I might give you is how can we look at a breakthrough way to convince regulators that what we're doing is acceptable, maybe not what would be a traditional approach to doing things, but we have the data, we have the analysis, and we have the models to show that what we have done is adequate for product approval. That's another way to look at it for product innovation. What more can we do? I think as an ecosystem, what can we do to encourage people to take more risk? And when I talk about new folks industry, how can we teach them to be more unstructured, as Simpson said, right? Not the tried and true way that maybe the education system helps them come up, but new way of thinking, taking risk in the way we do work, coming up with some innovative ideas and not being afraid to fail. I think that's one way we can contribute to our own workforce, but also in general, how we think about things. What more can we do? How can we help set up our processes in a general sense, not within our company, but outside in the ecosystem, so work can move seamlessly from maybe where it starts to where maybe it doesn't finish there, right? We need to become more of a global development for any product. And not only does it help India and the Indian ecosystem thrive and grow, but most definitely will contribute to breakthrough ways of bringing a product to market. Just a couple of things. I don't want to take up any more time. So.
Thank you, Sai. And I think all of it you spoke about would be quite relevant to every other panelist as well, and I'm sure of that. Let me ask this question to Vikrant. And Vikrant, this is more for the industry. In terms of the business model, and if I look at the talent, you spoke about the talent that you're hiring, right? Now, the talent could be talent that is servicing the globe. That could be talent that is servicing the Indian market. That could be commercial talent. But we do see, a shift in the way the constitution of that talent is taking place for multinational pharma companies, right? And I wanted to bring this question in front of this whole group because I think it's important to discuss that and shed some light on what the thinking on the business model is. I think it's well established that you all believe India is a great market for innovation. We all believe that there's going to be more and more footprint in India. But then how's the composition of that talent going to look like? I think it'll be helpful if you can, and then maybe any other panelists want to share any views on that.
But thank you very much. And I think, at least in Novo Nordisk, there are two aspects to it. One is that, yes, when the organization is started, you look for a talent which can actually accelerate the business and the growth domestically. But there is a complete mind shift change in terms of getting the talent, which is more international, which is much more mobile and can translate from one geography to the another geography. So that is becoming very important. At least in Novo, I can tell that we export not less than 15 people every year to different locations in different fields. So that becomes very important. Second thing is, which is becoming important, is that if India is going to become a digital hub, which we all believe, and most of the innovation and incubation is happening in India, and at least in Novo Nordisk, we are looking Novo India as the place where a lot of innovation can come in the digital side. We need the talent which can be physical as well as which has a mindset to take forward some of the strategic thinking in a digital way and find out some of those solutions. So you can say that yes, conventionally there was a brick and mortar model, and we have to shift fast forward very fast into a model which is transforming into a digital world, finding out some of the soft spots for the solutions which can come from India and which can go global. These are the two aspects. Second is, when I talk about a GPS, we are looking for really the knowledge workers who are servicing the world when it comes to accounting practices. So it's not only India, they need to be aware about what happens in the US, what are the practices around the globe, whether it is Canada, whether it is, Denmark, or the patent system across the globe, which also we have got. So it's not only limited to one geography, but to other geographies. So the various tracks, we really require the skill and the mindset, which is international. And when those capacity increases, we get the talent which is relevant for India, but also the talent which can also be exported across the globe.
Thank you, Vikrant. Any other comments from any of the panelists on this particular topic before I move to Simpson for the next question?
Maybe I can jump in, Amit.
Yes.
I think for the last 20 years, if you look at the digital thing, from the data management, clinical data manager, which is essentially large number of people working for it. I think India has progressed extremely well. We started the journey 20 years back in supporting R&D. What we should now look at it, and I think that's where a couple of things would be critical. One is showcasing R&D as a good career opportunities in the right at the early stages. When you look at MBBS curriculum in India or MD curriculum, unless you're doing pharmacology, there is not a good curriculum to establish that the R&D could be a progressive career for you, unless until someone goes into. So that is one. How do we nurture talent which needs skill sets which are needed for future, and not just look at the past? I think digital is one thing, but also as we are getting into cell and gene therapy, biologics, I guess those are the skill sets, competencies. Soft skills like problem solving, communication, I think would play an very, very critical role in global talent for which is ready for global roles. And third thing and last thing is essentially around the ecosystem. How do we develop, while we are doing a lot of clinical trials and there are a lot of clinical sites, but if you look at the exponential growth in quality sites, and the easiest example is always to look at how many plants are USFDA and how many clinical trial sites have a uniform methodology to do a good quality clinical trial. And I think those sites have unfortunately not grown at that same pace. So essentially, also at the sites where a lot of clinical work is happening, the site manager, the chief investigator, and the other sites, how do we do a quality work there so that the standards are at par with the global sites? There are, of course, some of the sites are absolutely at par with global, but there are also some other challenges there. So how do we bring in uniformity and prepare the talent which needs to be there at the sites, not just work in the corporate? And partnerships, where a lot of ecosystem development in terms of partnering with a lot of sites, a lot of companies like TCS, for example, just to name one, could also be there, right, where we work with CROs and partners to really prepare the sites and have some uniformity in terms of the way we develop the sites which are participating in global clinical trials.
Thank you, Manoj. Simpson, one of the programs that has been at least my personal favorite is the Blue Tree program, which Roche launched, right? And a related question to that, which is a broader question around patient support, patient market access, some of the innovation that reaches the last mile. I would really like if you can share some light on what Roche has done on that front, what the industry is doing, and how it's benefited innovation at large.
Yeah, it's a pretty broad topic, but let me try and be a little concise on this. See, at the end of the day, we can have all the groundbreaking advances in healthcare, and it's only going to be meaningful when they actually reach the patients who actually need them. So we have to say that many best-in-class products in India, which are still not available to all those who are in need and who could possibly benefit from it. So at this point of time, we're working with healthcare providers, regulators, and health systems to ensure that this access gap is met. But the key thing over here is it is just not the company's responsibility to provide access. It's the ecosystem which needs to come together to make health a priority. So you spoke about the Bloatery program. The Bloatery program is all about how do you kind of not look at just one part of the patient journey, which is mostly everyone talks about access is equivalent to a cost. And all you need to do is make it affordable and everyone else will get it. And that's not true. We see that um, we kind of like, I know KG keeps saying this again and again, we have the world's largest population of anemics in India. And it's not that we don't have a solution for that, which is economical. So there's multiple things about awareness, diagnosis, capability and capacity and infrastructure which are needed over and above the affordability component which needs to be met. So you need to look at it from a patient journey approach rather than it as just the cost approach. So that's the fundamental principle of the Bloatery program as well. But personally, for us in Roche, the access strategy is built on 5 pillars because if we have to have innovation in the market, we are thinking of number one, technology integration. Prioritization of the disease area itself is a big task because many times that doesn't get done. And very importantly, I think we have, as much as we have a large population, we don't have the adequate amount of resources, which means that there's some kind of decentralization of care pathways that needs to be done. Otherwise, we are not going to have, with the limited number of stakeholders and the healthcare professionals which are available, to cater to the needs of the broader population. And again, standardization of care pathways is a very important thing. There has to be equity of access. It shouldn't be that the rich get the best standard of care and the poor don't get it. That's completely not the right thing. How is it that we can drive this thought process? So we are looking at various ways in which we can, as an organization, focus on this aspect. And finally, we call this as a funding stack. For the kind of needs which are here in India, I don't think so a single entity will be able to kind of cater to that particular need. We have to look at innovative funding models, which would have something like multiple partners to come together to solve for this particular issue. So, in fact, funding remains one of the biggest barriers of accessing a standard of care drug in India right now. The government is looking at increased allocation to healthcare, but if you look at it, rare diseases where and the category 3 are among the rarest and most severe and do not have any funding support most of the time. So there are certain things which needs to kind of change. And yeah, I mean, I can go on and on, Amit, so I don't want to kind of like take too much of your time, but I'll be happy to share more, quite a few things which can possibly get done. And this is what in Roche that we are trying to do. And personally, as a health economist, I think we need to have data-based decision making. We have to look at societal burden and societal cost, for which we need to go into the health technology assessment at some point of time. That's when you go from a relativity and a gut feel into something which is data-based. And we need to take our decisions along those lines. So now that's when we build a high quality health system.
Absolutely, Simpson, and you actually laid the way for my next question, and this is for each one of you, because we've talked about a lot about the opportunity, right? I think Simpson has now touched upon some of the constraints and the challenges. Let me break it down into 3 parts, right? And I would love to have a viewpoint from each of you on that. Let me break it down into the point around infrastructure, around regulation, and around talent, right? And now let's juxtapose, what's going on the industry per se, and anyone can start. But what really are your observations on one or all of these three things with respect to what's going on in India? And maybe we can zoom in on the clinical aspect of it and then broaden it, please.
Yeah, but Amit, I can start here. I was the last one to put across on your first question. So I think what Simpson talked about, uh, let me talk about the access and touch on the infrastructure and relationship of an infrastructure. So in Novo Nordisk, we say a rule of half. We majorly play in the area of diabetes. So if there are 100 patients who have got diabetes, half of them don't even know that they have got diabetes. And then half of them actually go for the treatment or diagnosis. And then half of them actually go for the treatment. And then half of it only get an optimal outcome. So finally, out of 100, only 6.25% people are getting an optimal outcome for a disease like diabetes, where we have a dubious distinction of having 77 million people. So you can imagine the kind of burden it might have, economic burden, social burden, as well as the health burden in terms of any state or overall country. Now, when it comes to infrastructure, I think a lot is being done. COVID was one wake up call in terms of awareness of health as such. And I think it brought a little more awareness in the minds of the government stakeholder in terms of taking some more steps towards organized way of taking care of the population. So we believe that there is a starting point which has happened. Of course, the Atmanirbhar Bharat or Ayushman Bharat started much more early. There are some starting steps which are happening in the wellness clinics which are also there. But I think there is still quite a lot of room to play when it comes to infrastructure. Simpson touched on it, that access is not an alone game. It's an ecosystem. An ecosystem has got a strong play of infrastructure. And I think somewhere the government has to come forward along with private parties to build a strong fundamental infrastructure so that this axis can move forward. And I think the scope is plentiful, both from organization commercial aspiration point of view, but also from the health of nation point of view. Back to you.
Thank you, Vikrant. Anyone else on the questions?
If there's a pause, I can go in. So I think if we really see, we've spoken about talent, tech, and partnerships. So that's really the basis of taking the whole innovation and R&D story forward. And everyone's really elaborated on talent and tech, but I'll talk a little bit about partnerships. I think the synergistic collaboration cannot be overemphasized when we talk about really taking the R&D forward. While in my initial address, I said, look, this decade belongs to us, and it's for us to seize it. But it's not a given. It's not a given. I mean, we really need an ecosystem, like some of my colleagues have mentioned today, for us to succeed. And for R&D to really succeed, we need government to create that synergistic partnership. To begin with, when it comes to IPR, a strengthening of the IPR is going to be very critical if we want to look at R&D investments coming into the country. When we look at regulatory bodies, how do they work together? How do we shorten the timelines of approvals is going to be other very critical aspects. The third aspect of it is while we say talent, but how do we develop? And Manoj emphasized that, how do we develop talent which is industry ready? For most of us, what we see is, when we bring in talent, we need a certain gestation period to reorient them towards the applied side of science. So I think that's an element as well, which is going to be critical. we can move the value up the value chain. I think we've got a great opportunity, but we'll require a lot of synergistic collaboration.
There are two.
If I can
Yeah,
take,
go ahead, Sai.
yeah,
Absolutely.
pull the thread on the talent piece that that was talked about, right? That's, I think, the talent. I mean, we can talk about the other points that you mentioned, Amit, but on talent specifically is developing, as Manoj mentioned, soft skills. Soft skills have to definitely be developed to work in a global environment if we're going to do global product development. But the one thing that I would say is, how do we encourage people to really dig deep and stay on the technical realm, right? So we bring people that are very sharp. They get PhDs and great pedigrees, and they enjoy the science, but somehow the growth in the field is not equated to spending more time with science and really digging deep and becoming that expert in whatever field they choose. Somehow it's measured. I think that ecosystem plays a role. It's measured in how far do you rise in the corporate, and where do we go. So I think rewards and compensation do need to play a part there, to recognize people who really live out their passion and spend the time in doing innovation on chemistry or science fields. So if I were to look at Chennai as one of the 3 R&D centers for our business, I look at, in 10 years, how can I have say a dozen subject matter experts in any area that we are playing in? How can I develop that in this group to where globally they're recognized, within Pfizer at least, that they're the research fellows when it comes to their field? And that's a problem that I don't have an answer to that. But I think that if we can develop that, and there's it's a great deal that they can contribute to the ecosystem as well.
Maybe, I mean, just to add further to, one aspect of it is, while the number of clinical trials have increased and will continue to increase, I think how Gagan put it, right, it is not a given. Yeah. And I think the foundational things around people, but more importantly, if you look at, just from a look at, number of PhD research which happens in pharmaceutical or health in India, and you look at the numbers in big countries like China or US, I think there is a lot to, yeah. So when we say, India is not spending enough money in health as a percentage of GDP, I think it's on both the counts. One, from a treatment landscape, as to, build the structural, which are deficiencies, to get the right treatment for the population so that people are not getting, spending money. But more importantly, also to build the foundation around spending and incentivizing basic research. I mean, if you look at, I think from an educational perspective, we give example of software, Silicon Valley to Bangalore or Hyderabad, and essentially reason is because the number of software engineers which are passing out in India are comparatively much higher. So I guess one is that how do we put more money on the table as a country, so that people who have research mindset do not just go abroad. And we look at that model in South Korea, where we can ask them to come back. I think that's not going to happen in next 5-10 years unless until there is enough money on the table for basic research. Yeah. So I think that's also is part of the, yeah. From a regulation perspective, I think clinical trial regulations are pretty clear, robust, very, very transparent. I think it's our clinical trial regulation per se are quite good. The only point which I think I would restate here, because it's important, and we have been talking about it multiple times, is how does the clinical trial from commercialization perspectives are being looked at, and I think IPR does play a very, very important role. And let me reiterate it again. I think Gagan has said that. So I think those are the two additional things apart from what Vikrant and Gagan and others have said. Yeah.
Thanks everyone. And I know we are out of time. There are 2 questions that have come for the audience, and the way I'd request all of you all to answer it is give me a score from 1 to 10, 1 being lowest and 10 being the highest. And the 2 questions are: one is, how bright is the future of MNCs in India? And the second question is, how important is India in the MNC portfolio?
So we don't have a crystal ball, but I think
Manoj score.
I think from a revenue perspective, from a revenue perspective, everybody said number 14th is overall revenues, right? But when you look at when you decipher and look at 20% of the market is for multinationals, I guess we would be slightly lower. So it's not very important, but I think it's from a growth perspective it is. So I would say around 6 to 7. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
for
how
us,
bright is the future of MNCs?
Yeah.
Sorry, Vikrant, I just want to put Manoj on the spot and get both the scores. So he said 6 on 1.
I am extremely bullish for India. I think as an emerging country, and it's not just being an Indian. I think what India offers, and probably we need to tap it. I think I'm extremely bullish. I would say at least 9 for India for the next decade is going to be for us. Yeah.
No, to be fair to the colleagues who are working in Indian large organizations and making a difference, I would say it depends upon the way you fight. So I will put it MNC in India at 5. You play your game and you become 10 or you become 1. For Novo Nordisk, India is 10 out of 10, one of the most important affiliates. In fact, growing phenomenally well, and I think it will continue to remain very, very important.
Okay, I think I'll follow Vikrant's score, maybe slightly higher in terms of the first one. I close to around 7 in terms of how multinationals are looked at. But as a priority for Roche, I'd say it would be a 10.
Yeah, I would go much higher and say, look, MNCs, lead from an innovation perspective, lead not only just in product, but even in terms of management practices and the processes that we offer in the country. Clearly are lifting the game, and we've been doing that over the decades and over the years. So I think that to me is the real sweet spot from that perspective. Where does India fit in? I think, you cannot ignore today India. You can only ignore India at your peril. I mean, for every company, it has to be eventually, if you have to look at emerging markets, you have to look at future talent. India has to play a very, very critical role. So for me, it's 2 very high scores.
Sai, you're last.
Well, you're going to ask an R&D guy to talk about. So I will stay silent on that, but I would say that from an R&D and talent pipeline and the ability to contribute to product development, we're pretty high for Pfizer. I would rate as a 7 or an 8, and we're really looking at the coming decade to be even a bigger contributor for Pfizer's product development.
Great.
Yeah, I'll stay silent on the commercial side.
I appreciate that. Yeah, but this has been amazing. Thank you so much to the panelists for being so candid and participating with such energy. Thank you again to OPPI, and Khyati, back over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Amit Mookim, and thank you all our panelists. Thank you for such a riveting discussion. It was lovely to have all of you here.